Hello and welcome to the Classic Car Weekly podcast, the sibling podcast to the popular weekly title. I'm this week's host, Jesse Billington, and I'm again joined by Deputy Editor Chris Hope.
Hello.
And our content editor, James Peen.
Hello.
Gents, how are we? And we'll kick off as we usually do. How are your classics? Has there been any progress in any direction at all? I'll take the silence from you, Chris, to mean no.
Yeah, no, I've not had chance, unfortunately. I've been preoccupied with clearing out a lounge and playroom so that it can be decorated. But the good news, as I've mentioned before, once it is decorated, then everything in the garage can go into the study, and then I can start getting some space to make a start on the car. So that's very much the plan. So yeah, maybe this month I might actually see some activity. Fingers crossed.
Just got to clear all.
I'm just going to have to get it out though, because the Mini has been sat, and I think even if it has an engine that's leaking like a sieve, I'm going to use it just to do some short runs around sort of thing. So it'll cost a fortune because it'll be spewing oil out at a rate of knots sort of thing. But I'll have to do top ups when I get back in. But I'm sure definitely something I need to do.
I mean, the MG's found a new and interesting way of leaking oil, which is out of the top.
Okay.
The cap on the rocker cover has stopped sealing very well. So when it gets hot and up to pressure, it just starts fizzing oil out from there. And I'm like, I don't think that's how that's supposed to be working. But I mean, it's reaching pressure and the oil's getting to the cylinder head, which is fine. But I mean, it just means that every time I get back, I have to mop it out of all the little cooling veins on the top of the cylinder head and sort of all the way around it.
Surely that's a quick call to the MG Owners Club spares.
It's an aftermarket rocker cover, so it's not a conventional cap that goes on it. So I need to find where the original cap was sourced from, because it's like an aluminium one as opposed to just the stamped steel one. So I need to try and find where that's from and find the cap that fits that, because the spare rocker cover
the thread will be the same, won't it?
It's not threaded. It's sort of weird spring lock twist sort of two hooks going around it.
Yeah.
So
is that like just an anti-rust feature on MGs? Like just mist everything in oil?
Misting the engine bay with oil to protect the surrounding panel work. I love it.
I mean, it is technically doing that. I mean, the chassis rails from sort of above and indeed below and everything around there all looks fantastic because it's just got like a sort of baked on layer of oil. You know when people season like a cast iron pan? It's that sort of thing. I've seasoned the inside of my engine bay so it will never go off, which is perfect. But I mean that's the least of its problems at the moment. So obviously where I did all the suspension work, we'd taken the front bumper, the bonnet and the two wings off. And then we put all of that back on. And while the electrics at the front of the car now work, the electrics at the back of the car, which was untouched, have stopped working. So no brake lights. I've got indicators and I've got tail lights, but it's the brake lights that for some reason have stopped working. So I don't know if it's the brake switch, which would have been knocked about a bit when we were taking the wings on and off, or if there's a more significant problem, because every time you connect the battery, it's frying one of the fuses in the fuse block. So there's something that has a draw even when the ignition's off that is possibly frying that fuse, which is either the switch for the brake lights or the radio.
You see, you could spend hours, days, just get an auto electrician. Just get them to find out for you.
I could, or I could spend a few quid at my local photography store and get them to blow up the wiring diagram from the Haynes manual from A4 to about A1, I think is about as big as he can make it for me. So I'm going to pick that up today and then spend an evening with the highlighters tracing routes and figuring out what the components are that are going in and out of this fuse block, and then multimeter checking, see which ones have got resistance, which ones have got lives, which ones are earthing correctly, and
it's an exciting night for Jesse Billington then, is it?
Yeah, honestly, my 20s I was expecting them to be a bit more dynamic than this, but here we go. Meanwhile, James, how's things going on your side of the workshop?
I have a little bit of progress. Again, it was kind of pointless exercise. So we've got my daughter's 8th birthday coming up, so I had to get the garden all sorted last weekend. So there was a lot of clearing up, and I said to my wife that I'm going to get out and do a little bit on the Beetle. So, and then I thought I'd give myself an hour. What can I do in an hour? And the fact that the car sat outside for 3 years, going slowly rustier and rustier, was really doing my head in. So all the black paint where the rust had started to sort of seep out had made the black paint go blue. So I thought, I know what I did. I'll just spend an hour giving it a bit of a clean up with Brillo pads. You know, those Brillo pads you get with the soap and they're quite fine. So 3 hours later, I'd done the entire car and realised I'd got no cutting compound. So all the fine scratches I put into the paint still there. But I've ordered some cutting compound and I did get some wax on it just to protect it. So it's raining at the moment, so it's beaded up nicely. So it's protected. There's no sort of major shale on the roof anymore or any of the wings. And it's looking a lot better, which is a bit more motivation. So once my cutting compound turns up and to get my daughter's birthday out of the way, and the in-laws are here for a week, so I'll probably stay for a little bit. I don't tell my wife I just said that, but yeah, I'll escape out and I'll get some cutting compound on it, give it a bit of a machine polish, because it's just motivation really, because it was looking really tatty, and seeing it all shiny and looking lovely again. It's like, yeah, actually, I want to get
on the backside.
Yeah, exactly. I've kind of forgot how nice it can be. So yeah, so it was an hour that turned into 3 hours. As I said to my wife, it's like car hours are like dog years, aren't they? So I'm just going out in the driveway to spend like an hour, and like 3 hours later, I got a phone call. Where are you? I was like, yeah, I'm coming in now. Yeah. So yeah, it was looking better, and there's a little bit of progress. I suppose it was a job I wanted to do, and it's a motivation now.
Just sort of
sometimes any job is better than the job you should be doing, I think.
Yeah, it was a job on the list, so I've kind of ticked that off. I mean, obviously I've scratched the paint in places, but I've done it before.
You've added to the to-do list by taking something off the to-do list.
Yeah, it's a lot more patinaed than when I first got that car, which is kind of nice. I do like a patina paintwork, but it was looking really tatty, so it looks shiny now. The major rust's gone. It's a little bit more primer in places, but yeah, I've got some plans for it. So yeah, just crack on really.
Nice, yeah. So slow progress. I need to definitely polish up the MG as well, because where I had the wings off, I thought I'll clean the inside of the wings. So I bought just some fairy dish soap from Tesco's and a scouring brush just to sort of get all the dirt and grime that builds up inside the wings. Because obviously we've got the skin of the wheel arch and then obviously the actual wing that drops down between it, and it just packs up with dirt in there. So I thought I'll clean it all out, fog it over with some sort of yellow paint remover or rust remover and paint sort of correction, just on the inside so it's protected and clean. But the problem is the soap has seeped through and sort of dribbled around in places, and modern fairy washing up liquid is obviously a lot stronger than it used to be, because it's started to stain sort of the lacquer and the top coat on the car. So I've invested in a machine polisher, and hopefully I'll be able to sort of buff it back out of the top coat and just sort of bring that back with a bit of paint correction. So I did get a load of really nice products from Autoglim earlier this year, so I'll be sort of cracking into those and making good use of them, which will be quite useful. But importantly, the car's back on the road, and with the new suspension, feels brilliant. The front end used to bob and weave all the time because it had no suspension functionally. It was just all in the sidewall, and now it will hold a line through a corner and you'll hit a bump and it doesn't try and change lanes on you at the front. It's a lot more planted and feels like a good MG should, which is really quite nice, and it's enjoyable to drive. But it's a very Max Verstappen setup. It's all on the nose because I've done nothing to the rear, so the rear now feels incredibly fidgety and twitchy. So it's like having it back on the old dry rotted city car tires. You can feel it trying to push on sort of roundabouts and fast bends. I'm like, oh, we're back to being agile and dynamic now. This is fun.
That's what I always loved about Frog Eye Sprites when I drove them, is just that edginess on the rear in particular, sort of thing. Just that very awareness that there's no weight, and you can have fun with it, get it to skip about. So yeah, sorry James, I interrupted you.
No, just say it looked good seeing it in the office car park this week for our catch up. I thought, yeah, that was quite cool. I walked past the row of cars, and then obviously there was a midget tucked in there. I was like, oh yeah, Jesse's in the midget.
There's few cars that my BMW 116D can completely obscure, and the midget is definitely one of them. So
yeah, it tucks perfectly within sort of the wheelbase of your car, and height-wise, even like very nearly even the roofline on my car disappears behind the bonnet of yours. But in sort of the sea of grey SUVs that fills the office car park, mine's somehow the tiny yellow car hides really nicely, and then you'll catch like this little pop of yellow, and you're like, there it is.
Is it a new hood that it's got, or has it just had some treatment to its hood? It looked brand new. Like, I mean, mimosa yellow and black, the two tend to sort of like really. Yeah, I was on my way back to my car having finished work before you left, and I'm like, that looks brand new.
I think it had a new hood somewhere along the line. I do have somewhere in a folder here the original chaser that was done by CCW contributor and legend of the title Nick Larkin.
Nick Larkin.
He did the chaser on it back in, I want to say it might have been 2019. It was quite some time ago. Um, and I think then it had a new hood installed.
Right.
So
Is this
it's
just me not having seen the hood up and noticing it
possibly.
probably for the first time? Because you're such a madman that you will just sort of drive everywhere with hood down.
Yeah, possibly also that, and the fact that I usually am sort of going places with the roof down, so it's usually tucked away under its little tonneau cover. But yeah, I think it's definitely had a new hood somewhere because I was quite annoyed when I saw it because I'd been to see it at Anglia Car Auctions to have a poke around at it before the auction, and then I get there on the day of the auction, sort of stood by it, ready to do the bidding, and someone else has stood by it and put a hot cup of tea on the roof, and it's left a tiny cup mark, sort of slightly melted into the fabric. I'm like, that's the one
Yeah.
like flaw in an otherwise perfect roof. Driving
Yeah.
it home on Wednesday though, in the absolutely teeming rain, it has got a little bit of a leak along the point where the roof bar joins to the top of the windscreen rail. So I'll
Yeah.
either to see if I can find just a little blob of silicone or maybe a new sort of weather sealing strip that will just clip into that spot. But it was a few drops, and considering that it was absolutely torrential rain coming down the A1, I can't fault a what 45, 6 year
Exactly.
old car for
Yeah, yeah,
being a
yeah.
little bit leaky.
I've got there's a very slight leak at the base of the windscreen, and it's not a concern, but I'm very aware that when I had my old MR2, that's how its various sort of floor pan woes began, with just a slight amount of leak through the windscreen, and I addressed the windscreen first, but the damage had been done and then it was festering away. And it wasn't just the floor pan, it was going through to sort of the wheel arch and into sort of the suspension area. And that's what
Mm.
just made the repair uneconomical sort of thing as a repair sort of thing. So that's what spelt the end of that particular car sort of thing. So yeah, I get, yeah, you need to stay on top of these things.
Yeah, here we go. I found the chaser. I knew I had it saved somewhere. And it does say that in 2019 it had a new roof, which was along with a lot of other work, as well as invoices and MOTs dating back to 1983.
Mhm.
So pretty good for a 79 car, considering there's only what makes it 4 years of missing paperwork and invoices. Not too bad. And I bought it for less than its asking price when it appeared as a chaser as well at Spur Classic Cars in Loxley, Sheffield. They were after 5,500. I got it for 4.5 at auction.
It just shows how static cars of that era have now become, sort of
Mm.
thing. So there's not really much dynamism. I'm not even going to try and say that word. You know what I'm trying to say.
Dynamism?
Uh, thank you.
I don't think that's right either.
The movement in prices is this sort of 80s and 90s cars currently. And yeah, but it means that you know, MG midgets, you're not going to be out of pocket when you come to sell. If you do decide that, I think it's fairly reasonable with the things that you've done to it to keep it on the road that you can probably expect what you paid for to get that back.
Hmm. I mean, I don't think I'll be selling it, certainly not anytime soon. It's probably going to be one for the long-term collection. I think it's such a fun car.
Ah, well,
And
you have the luxury of the space, don't you? So
yeah, yeah, certainly at the moment I do. And also it's one of those things where it genuinely is one of those cars that you get in and doorbell going off. You get in, you everything else just melts away. You could be having an absolutely terrible day, but as soon as it starts up and it settles into that
Mhm.
really sort of lumpy idle, that nothing else matters, and it has those brief moments where it just makes sense. And it was when I was coming to the office actually on Wednesday morning, mulling over a load of other bits and pieces, a few things I needed to sort of think over and get through, done with the day. The radio still wasn't working. I'd had my headphones in, and some Steely Dan came on, and I was just like, oh, it's just that moment where it's the right music, the right car, just the right scenario, and it just always feels special. So it's, yeah, a car that I won't be getting rid of. But speaking of the radio, I do need to get it working because we have another installment of terrible tapes and crap cassettes. Three three tape collections. These again came from a former contributor to the series. This was Sunburst Books, and they sent me another letter to come with it, which was quite very nice. Hi, Jesse. I found some more cassettes for your MG Midget. I hope you enjoy them over the summer season. Sunburst is a community bookshop staffed entirely by volunteers. I'm in charge of sorting out the CDs. It's a mammoth task, but after a year of hard work, I've pretty much cracked it. And the bookshop has a large selection of automotive and transport titles, which could be of interest to classic car enthusiasts. We also have a large selection of Haynes manuals, which are a bargain at £2.50 each. Regards, Fred at Sunburst Books. So if you're in Rainham or the Kent area and you need a Haynes manual, £2.50, go check them out. And yeah, we've got 3-tape rock collection, which we were all having a look at in the office, and has got some pretty good ones on there, as well as the Soul collection volumes 1 and 2. So Fred, thank you very much for sending these up, and I will be getting the radio working over the weekend, and we'll be able to enjoy those. So I've got a long trip planned over to Wales with the car later this month, and I'll be looking forward to hopefully having the cassette tape working then and powering through the stacks of tapes that I've been sent in the past sort of month, seemingly. If any CCW readers are handy with a 3D printer, feel free to make me some sort of cassette rack that will fit in the glove tray of the midget, so I'm not constantly fumbling around for just random cassettes and grabbing them out and putting them in. If someone could make me a little holder, like a toast rack for tapes, that'd be very useful. You know the address to send them to, and yeah. The next challenge for the listener. But anyway, with that out of the way, we'll touch on something a little more sort of formal. And this week's lead news story. James, tell us more about it.
This kind of follows on nicely from the previous week's news story about the huge growth in late 90s and early noughties modern classics. And as we all know, most of us are quite happily spanning away on an old car, but when it comes to something with computers that you have to plug in, it's like we just don't bother touching it, do we? So a number of specialists we spoke to saying that actually this is a huge opportunity for people to sort of specialize in later cars. So we spoke to First Line, who supply clutches and parts like that, and also Fuzz Townsend chimed in with this, and he was saying that he's been banging on this for a while, that there's a space in the market for a new generation of specialists to come on board who not necessarily going to take away jobs from the existing specialists out there, but to bring skills that they're probably using at the moment in modern dealerships to apply them to the classic sector. And a bit of a growth industry, if someone was to get in on it now, there's a lot of scope for them to sort of transfer those skills to people who are interested in modern classics but are not necessarily going to spend on them.
I think it's one of those things that we're going to see that shift as we get more towards sort of technical cars appearing on the classic scene. And yeah, I think the Jimny for me has been an interesting one because I've never done anything like electrical with it. It's always been the mechanical bits that I've been over, and I don't feel I'd be confident tackling anything that sort of delves into the ECU, the wiring loom there. I mean, I was talking about doing wiring on the MG. That's easy because it's got 12 electrical things on it. The Jimny's got OBD2 ports, it's got O2 sensors, it's got all sorts of bits and pieces that are quite specialist to tackle, and it's also quite sort of clunky and old in its sort of style and its design. It's electrical engineering that doesn't exist on modern cars. There is that sort of pitfall where it's classic electrical engineering now, and it sort of needs that specialist touch, I think, which is quite interesting.
What did the feeling did you get from the likes of Fuzz and First Line? Is it that the specialists that are springing up are going to be tailored specifically towards modern classics, or is it they're tailored towards the specific jobs that are frequently keeping modern classics off the road? So it's a subtle one, but is it the do you see a scenario where it's specialists and they're advertising as being specialists of a particular era of car, or is it that they're electrical specialists, ECU specialists? How do you see them pitching themselves, or is it one and the same?
Kind of one of the same, but first recommended that specializing in a particular mark is the way forward. So if you're into MX5s, specialize in MX5s and just carve out a niche for yourself so that you could become the go-to person. So build up a reputation for working on those and knowing what goes wrong and what the common fixes are. It's as he was saying, it's like with electrical faults, it's not simply plug it into the computer and say that component's wrong, but a sensor can throw up a fault further down the line that you then have to trace back. So you're saying if you can actually get into working on a particular model and you become the go-to guy on it, that's a really good avenue for you. And you know, someone who's doing that is possibly working in a master dealership right now, so they're used to working on these cars, and as they become older and move into the classic sector, you know, you just your skills sort of drift along. So you might be
Yeah.
working on a modern car now, but then you'll be working on a classic in a few years' time.
And equally, it's not unheard of for sort of certainly main dealerships where they've got the big workshops as the model or the fleet age that they service. So, sort of a Vauxhall dealership, as it ages, it no longer sees itself having to deal with certain cars. They usually tend to get rid of a load of like the stock and the tech that deals with those older cars. And you often see some of the technicians, I know local to me, we've got, I think it's Griffin Autos, that essentially set itself up dealing with Vauxhalls that main Vauxhall dealerships no longer touched by going out buying up the tools and the software and the hardware to sort of plug into them and fiddle with them and keep them going. And it was this sort of really interesting of like, yeah, because I wouldn't take like a 15-year-old Astra to a Vauxhall main dealer for a service or a problem or a fault, but the little independent guy on the industrial estate nearby still has all the sort of computers and the port readers and the scanners to do all that work and used to be a Vauxhall technician, so he does know what he's doing. And it's that sort of thing of specialized quite early on in dealing with that sort of a thing.
Yeah.
And when our old Astra started sort of throwing a bit of a wobbly, it was a 57 plate, and we took it there to have all sorts of bits and pieces looked at, and the roof mechanism, because it was folding hardtop roof as well, a lot of solenoids and motors and bits that go wrong with that. But he was a lot more familiar with it than say a modern Vauxhall dealership where they're just trained on the Corsa, the Antara. He was able to properly look at it and pick it apart and find what the problems were. So it is one of those things of, yeah, the skills that go with those cars are also becoming sort of heritage engineering at the same time, I think is the right phrase to start using.
Yeah, exactly. When I used to live in Surrey, there was a friend of a friend who used to do all of my work on my Audi 1.8T, and he was working at McLaren, but prior to that, he was a proper Audi technician. So he was trained and he knew those cars inside out. So on the side, he was doing people's cars, he was doing service work, he was doing repair work, but he just sort of took those skills that he was no longer using in the modern work area and just applied them to a lot of people who say who'd kind of fallen out of the main dealer network because their cars are no longer catered for. He'd scooped them up. He carved out a nice little niche for himself.
I think there's an ever-growing sort of argument for that, and I think there's also an ever-growing idea that that's going to be supported with essentially sort of more and more older cars staying on the road. There was an interesting piece on Irish television recently around essentially their rollout of supports and grants for buying electric cars, because over there I think the average age of the average car on the road in Ireland at the moment is about 13, which is sort of clocking on a fair bit. And obviously that's the average. There's going to be a lot of cars that are a lot more older, still sort of pressed into regular service, and they're still going to need sort of someone who understands early noughties electrical engineering on cars to be able to sort of pick apart problems when they go wrong. So it's definitely one of those things, as the general fleet on the road ages, there still needs to be people that can understand keeping them going, because modern cars are expensive and there's no easy way around that. And this was sort of part of the point that this program was sort of making, was the average car over in Ireland, sort of even a cheap new electric car sets you back 30 to 35,000 euros.
Yeah.
But the average family, even with a £5,000 grant on that, doesn't really want to take on a 25,000 euro debt to pay off over a car when it's cheaper to keep an older one going. So they said this is why the age of the average car in Ireland is aging. And it was a really interesting point, actually, because it's something we've often discussed, is that average sort of fleet age in the UK is aging, and as more classics stay on the road for longer, or more modern cars stay on the road for longer. And yeah, there needs to be that support for them, because cars get to a point where they become less DIY-able. And I think sort of certainly towards the tail end of the noughties, there is that big change in it. If you look under the bonnet of something from 2012, is very different from something from 2002, and that's a decade shift.
I think you're talking about electric cars. I think a lot, I generalize, but a lot of people are treading water. I don't think it's a question now of range anxiety or anything like that. I just think that there's people that want to see evidence of electrics making that next jump, and they've not seen it yet. So they've not seen it be embraced from an infrastructure point of view rather than an ownership point of view. And I think there's genuine concerns, because people as you just outlined, it's a big amount, a big chunk of your cash. And if you are buying outright in particular, then you're looking for a long-term commitment sort of thing. And I don't think that people have the certainty of that long-term commitment yet. I think that electric cars aren't the find themselves in a scenario where you get the benefits that you maybe did 5 years ago either. It's not a given that you're going to get a cheap tax rate or anything like that as well, sort of thing. So obviously, electricity is expensive as well. I'm not for a second saying that it's as expensive as putting fuel in the tank. Obviously, it's cheaper to run in terms of, pence per mile an electric car. But that upfront cost with that uncertainty, I think, is just enough for people just to stick with the devil they know. What that means for classics, I've no idea. I mean, I was up in Newcastle last weekend. And it's a fair old drive from Stamford. It's 3 hours. You start looking at number plates quite and just letting them wash over you. And I was seeing plenty of like 56s and things like that. So and then you just take a moment to think about that. That's getting off like a 20-year-old car. So looking at cars alone isn't always indicative of how old they are. Cars that can be released in sort of 2007 and have production runs through to 2014 and they'll look almost identical, sort of thing. So it's not always that gives away the age of a car. So but yeah, I fully agree that I think there's plenty of people who continue to use their cars, or maybe use second cars. Maybe they have the primary car is the car that does all the donkey work, but they're quite happy to hold on to the Polo or the Fabia or something like that as a runabout, as the about town car sort of thing, where maybe if it does break down, it's not the end of the world. Maybe, I don't know. But with regards to this particular story, I completely get where Fuzz is coming from with regards to it makes sense to specialize and become that guy for 3 Series or that guy for golfs. There are a lot of 3 Series and there are a lot of golfs, and I just worry what that means for the Nissan Micras and the 18-year-old who has an issue and looking for with greatest respect, there's not that many Nissan Micra specialists, if any, sort of thing. So what that means in the context of this story is it would be interesting to see where that goes. So as always, the cars that are well catered for will continue to be well catered for, I'm sure, but what falls between the cracks in the meantime. So
I think that's where the internet really steps in, though, because while on the face of it, there won't be sort of an owners club for K10 or K11 micros, there is a lot of the internet forums where people have already tackled those problems or know a guy who can do it. And it's sort of very much sort of the internet is, I don't want to say it's taking over, but it's certainly supporting the club scene in the fact that you have those niches, those people where sort of people congregate around a certain car, make, model, mark, whatever. And that's where the sort of the sort of hive mind of sort of knowing how to repair a car now lives for many cars, models, and certainly a younger generation. With Midget and Sprite, when I was doing the suspension work, someone in the Midget and Sprite club had put together like a full proper workshop guide on how to disassemble, overhaul, and repair it all, and it was just downloadable as a PDF with all the torque specs, with the original MG workshop guide on how to lower the spring pan out of the wishbone so you can remove the spring without firing it across the workshop and killing yourself. And that's a very old style of that sort of hive of information. But I know with the modern cars, that exists in the form of YouTube videos, in the form of people doing sort of tutorials and forums and Facebook groups. So it is still out there. It's just accessed in a very different way. And I mean, people specializing in, like you said, MX-5s, Volkswagen Golf 3 Series, that's no different as we've seen with car clubs that are specialized in just the MG midget, or certainly like specific models of classic car. I mean, there are people that specialize in just tuning the BMC A series engine, and that's a very unique thing to do. This is just the latest evolution of that idea. So again, it's this thing of people with what they seem to be perceive as modern cars, not quite realizing that they're functionally now being treated as a classic car because there is a specialist guy for doing that. There is a certain should go to do this. You used to take your TR7 to a guy that specialized in Triumphs. Like it's very much that same thing of if you've got an MX-5, there are probably MX-5 specialists you could take it to now for rust treatment, for getting gearboxes overhauled, for doing the rear suspension. The Mark II was famous because it had that glued together sort of front subframe that also was a rust trap. There is almost certainly, if you ask the club, there is certainly a guy who specializes in repairing that specific section of metal. And
Yeah.
again, that's a car that's what, 25 years old to 25 to 20 years old. Unbeknownst to people, these cars are becoming treated and used and sort of preserved in the same way that a more archetypal classic is. And it's this sort of strange thing of making people go, funny enough, you're now technically a classic car owner through just the function of how you own your car. It might not on the face of it seem like that, but welcome to the hobby.
Yeah, yeah, no, you make a valid point. I think my take on that age-old question of what is a classic car has never really been informed by age. It's been informed by usage rather than how old it is, because yeah, certain cars attract hobby use earlier than others. You know, it tends to be sports cars. If it's British, that tends to mean that it gets more readily welcomed. So yeah, I in terms of age, I don't think it's a useful barometer, but yeah, I think it's quite an interesting point you made there, Jesse, about, you know, the classic car enthusiast who doesn't know he's a classic car enthusiast, that's just sort of, you know, stumbled into it without really knowing about it. I think, yeah, that probably does apply. So
Yeah, just
With like my T5 Caravelle, I remember years ago there was a forum, and at the time I wasn't that interested because they were modern cars. Now I've got a T5 Caravelle and it's 2004, so now that's very much a classic. And so you say that's sort of drifted without even thinking.
But
about
again,
it.
you saying that is your opinion. It's not a statement that it was too new. As in, yes, we all agree it was too new. It's just that was just your opinion on it, wasn't it, sort of thing. So
Yeah,
there's plenty of people who could have been in your shoes who went, no, yeah, that is a classic sort of thing. So,
I mean,
but
it was only when you said I could write about it in the mag that I thought, is it a classic? And I was like, no, it can't be, because it was like I was still using it daily at that point.
it was the
I
same
think
with the Jimny.
I think a car has to be out of production. I think there has to be hurdles to be jumped. I think you have to go above and beyond simply taking your car to a dealer and asking them to fix it. I think it does. I think for it to be a classic, and particularly for it to be embraced within the hobby, it has to involve going the extra mile to keep it on the road. So yeah, that and my definition of that is that, you know, it's not in production anymore at the very least. Not that you have to buy a car that's difficult to keep on the road as a classic. That's not the point I'm really making here. But you know, it has to be a car that you can't just drive to a local dealer network and go fix that, and then I can hop in it and do 12,000 miles without really thinking about it. So I think there's a general appreciation that, you know, it's more difficult than a new car to keep it going. And there's a joy to be had from doing that. There's a sense of achievement that comes hand in hand with it. So, and I think you're perhaps missing out if you don't do that. So, but yeah, again, each to their own.
I suppose you could say anything you have to put the key in the door to open it is now a classic.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, the remote locking on my Jimny's failed, so I mean, technically that makes it very much a classic.
I'm
by
gonna
that
say,
metric.
yeah, there's a lot of
Yeah.
people just throwing away their blippers now and claiming classicdom by default. So
Yeah, just can't be bothered to change the little sort of disc battery in the back of it. But
the batteries
I mean,
run out. It's a classic.
hurrah. But no, it does actually lead nicely into sort of the next point I wanted to mention, which was sort of favorite moments of classic camaraderie on the road, sort of waves and greetings from other road users. And one of the things I noticed when I first got the Jimny back in 2017, 18, I think it was the fact that there was sort of an established Jimny wave. It's sort of one of those cars that has a community around it, despite at the time that generation of cars still being in production. Actually, it was just coming to the end of its production run, but you'd wave at other Jimny owners, and it's now extended into the fourth generation, so the modern really boxy mini G-Wagon looking one, to the point that when I was going to the young owners meet up in Withall on the other weekend, I'm coming along the M6 and I spot a fourth gen sort of tailing a Land Rover Discovery. I think it was a Series 2 Discovery. Both of them on giant mud terrain tires. They were clearly going off-roading somewhere. And the sort of I spot the window going down on the fourth gen, and the driver's sort of arm comes out and sort of gives me a little sort of hang loose out the window. And I'm like, okay, that's kind of cool. I like that. That's a nice bit of camaraderie. And then when I was doing Wheeler Dealer Live last weekend in the MG, roof down on the way back coming into Milton Keynes, a TR4 and then an MG Midget go the other way, and I'm sort of wave out the top, and you get the little wave back and a flash of the lights. I'm sort of like, okay, that's fun. I kind of like this, but it's great how the Jimny is treated in much the same way. It has that community aspect to it, in the same way that you wave at other classic car users on the road. Or maybe I'm just a daft sod that just likes waving at people. But
when I saw this is the topic of the conversation, my first thought was, I want to know from James whether Beetle drivers wave to other Beetle drivers.
Oh,
do you
all
wave
the
to
time.
modern ones?
All the time.
All the time. You either get a flash, a wave, or the old school no worries. If you get one of those from like an older Beetle driver, you know they were into Volkswagen in the 90s.
Oh.
I might be doing the Mini scene a disservice then, but I never get waved at me when I went in my Mini and I wave to another Mini.
Oh.
Maybe they just don't like me.
It's that split second moment though when you wave to someone.
I'll see. You know, have you ever had that moment where you sort of see like an Austin 7 or something like that, and you go to wave, and then you maybe just sort of like, I'm going to wave, but I'm not going to expect anything back because they're probably just going to look at me and go, well, you know, you're so far removed from what I have that, you know, yeah, okay, classic, but yeah, not really, mate. And they're the ones that always wave. And then I see like Mini owners, and it's happened quite a few times. It's happened at least half a dozen times. Happened at least half a dozen times when I was on my way to one of the CCW meets at Withall. Maybe, you know, yeah. Anyway. And yeah, I don't expect anything back from sort of like some of the I mean, there's a chap who has a Riley, a 1930s Riley that Jesse will be able to tell me the model on, but I'm not sure which one it is. It always sort of appears in Stamford car park every now and again over summer. And I wave to him, and I'm just like, yeah, he's way too cool sort of thing to wave back. So I think he always does. But Mini owners don't. And yeah, maybe I'm a bit worried I've upset the Mini community now. So
it's that split second moment where you think, do I wave and look like a bit of a sado, or do I ignore them and feel really terrible that I've ignored them as they come towards you? So I always give them a little wave or a flash or something, or a little nod. But
I always go for the wave because it might just improve someone's day. That little sort of put a smile on someone's face. That for me is I think part of the fun of it. And I think Jimny owners almost go out of the way to do it. Like we'll do sort of like the full flash and wave and everything. Like even if you're going the opposite way on a dual carriageway and you spot another one in the distance, you'll see the headlights go and you'll see the person sort of frantically waving through the windscreen. I'm like, we're an odd bunch. Why we've bought incredibly impractical tiny 4x4s, but we recognize that someone else has made that same series of decisions and embrace it fully. And I think the MG is great because usually you've got the roof down, so it's really easy just to poke a hand out the top and wave at someone. It doesn't get missed at that point. But it's just one of those things that I really enjoy doing. I think it's part of the classic camaraderie, and even if it's just a completely different classic, I always seem to get a wave back as well, sort of regardless if it's someone going the other way in sort of classic American or something pre-war. Maybe people just like seeing a goofy sort of tiny little sports car in bright yellow, and it just sort of cheers their day up. I just think it's a fun thing to do.
I mean, how many times have you been on the motorway and someone sort of slowly like just slowed down as they've been overtaking and giving you like a nod or a thumbs up? That's like the ultimate seal of appreciation, isn't it? I mean, I do that all the time. If you're going somewhere and you see someone something cool, you overtake and then you slow down and give them a little nod of appreciation.
It's like the inverse of when you see a bad driver and you slowly pass them just to check your own preconceptions. It's sort of like that. I want to see who's driving this. They're cool. But I had that when we were coming back from retro rides with mate Rich in the Comet, me and the Sidley. But that was because we were going through the Hindhead Tunnel key banging and sort of lifting off and sort of spitting flames out of exhaust. And then a Range Rover comes past the two of us with just a phone pressed to the glass, filming and someone waving. And we're like, okay, at least they're not filming to send it to the police. This is probably they wouldn't be waving and smiling if they were upset about this display of hooliganism. But yeah, it was. Yeah, I don't know. It's just one of those things. It's what makes the classic community so fun is the fact that it's so cheery and so sort of convivial, broadly speaking. Apart from if you're Chris in a Mini, whom seems to be sort of despised by the rest of the Mini world.
I mean, I'm even getting flashed now by other R baths. which blew my mind when that happened.
That doesn't surprise me. I mean, I've been seeing it Fiat Bars at the likes of sort of the Bicester Scrambles for a good few years now, sort of thing, and that's always been a sort of a car to my mind, which is that was always going to get classicdom quite early, sort of thing. If anything, I'm quite surprised that they've not taken off to the extent that I perhaps thought they would, because then whenever I see the likes of a group of Fiat Bars at shows, they're always there in numbers, like big numbers, sort of thing. They're mobile, sort of thing. So comes as no surprise to me that they wave. So
maybe that's another definition of a classic. If you get a wave,
yes, a random wave.
Yeah. The remote locking doesn't work and random people wave at you. I mean, it's not as bad as when I first got the Jimny, and I noticed there's weirdly a lot of Jimneys around my area. If I was out on foot, I still had to resist the urge to wave at the other Jimny. I'm like, no, you're not behind the wheel. They're just
they have zero context.
Yeah, you've completely lost the context because now you're just waving at other people who have the same car as you, but you're not in it. They don't know that. You
Unless
just
you're
look
wearing
like
a big badge.
now. Yeah, I am a Jimny owner all the time. But
maybe I should just start wearing like a BMC rosette, you know?
Yeah, that'd be kind of fun. You could do the Richard Porter and get sort of like the British Leyland tattoo, because he's got one on like the inside of his arm. He's got the sort of the British Leyland plug hole on his, I think it's on his forearm, just sort of on the inside there, which is kind of a funky one. You could get that as sort of like the little BMC rosette just on your calf or something. Just sort of roll your trouser leg up at shows so people know. Sort of like a
I'm
terrible.
Keeping quiet. I'm keeping quiet.
Yeah. I'm just being attacked by a puppy that's barged through the office door.
Oh, you've got to show the puppy on camera now. You can't mention it and then not hold it up for viewers of the podcast.
Oh,
there we go. Oh,
lovely doggo.
Looked lovely, but it's a terrible dog, when you Margo. Yeah.
She seems unconvinced.
Yeah. Get at him.
There we go. A perfect.
That seems like a good time to stop.
I was saying, the dog requires James'
before
attention.
Any more dogs interrupt any more podcasts.
Yeah. So we'll
just races itself.
All that too. So we'll wrap up this week's episode there. Obviously, we'll be back next week with another issue of Classic Car Weekly, and I'm correct in saying that next week's issue is a bumper summer special. It is our June special edition. Chris, you've been out and about road testing some interesting cars with Mike and David up at an auction house. We'll keep the details on that dry.
Well, we kind of previewed it a couple of episodes, didn't we, sort of thing, up in North Yorkshire. So yes. Issue on sale 10th of June next Wednesday. All will be revealed. Please go have a look. We had an awful lot of fun.
Yeah, it's a very good one. We've got 40 Petrolhead presents for a Father's Day gift guide, top tweaks on improving your classic, coverage from some of the biggest shows across the week and previous weekends. We've already mentioned Wheeler Dealer Live. David was down doing London to Brighton with other James in the Audi TT. And somehow we end up taking on a free XJ40 somewhere in the mix of all that. So it's a packed issue. There's plenty to enjoy. And that will be out next week, along with hopefully another episode of the Classic Car Weekly podcast. Gents, thank you very much for joining me this morning.
Thank you.
No problem.
And we'll speak again soon. Thank you very much for listening.